As you know, on Sunday night or Monday morning of every week, we post a new expository semiotics explaining why we would choose which lectionary readings. But in these readings, our dream is and our desire is to help you read the signs and fondle the details and spot the seminal metaphors, the condensed signs and the stories that are key for preaching to a digital culture. So strap on your seatbelt and join us as we prospect our passages for today. This is Leonard Sweet vlog number 172 for the 16th of July, 2023. It's great to be with you here in the height of the summer. I have chosen as our scripture passage today a story that is very familiar, but it helps to illuminate, at least in my mind, and I hope I'll convince you as well, one of the great cliches of the last couple decades, and that is it's time for us to get out of the box. We got to do out of the box thinking. We got to do out of the box activities, and we got to get out of the box. It's always, I've kind of tried to refrain as much as I can from using that because it's always bothered me that it seems to me the more you're out of the box, the more you need a box to begin with. And the more out of the box thinking, the more you need the framework of a box in which to plant yourself and to base yourself so you can get out of the box. So it's not just leave the box behind, but it's both and. It's begin with a box and treasure your box, but that enables you to get out of the box. Be really creative and innovative and adventurous. And it wasn't until just this passage here from our Genesis reading for today in this lectionary that I finally found the biblical grounding, I think, to be able to discuss this with you and encourage you to get out of the box, but only because you got a box to begin with. This is the famous story, well familiar story of Jacob and Esau. Or you should put Esau and Jacob. In fact, the biblical the storyline ought to read, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. But it's not. It's I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And why Jacob and not Esau? Since Esau was the first one out of the womb. But let's read the story. I'm getting ahead of myself. So here we go. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer. And his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, in other words, they're fighting even in the fetus, okay? As brothers will do. And she said, if it is to be this way, why do I live? So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, and all his body like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished. Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, first, sell me your birthright. Esau said, I am about to die. Of what use is my birthright to me? Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Now, those are some of the most resounding, haunting, in some ways, frightening words in the Hebrew scriptures. Thus Esau despised his birthright. What does it mean to have a birthright? What is a birthright? Well, a birthright is a special privilege and responsibility that belongs to the firstborn son in the family. And these special favors, privileges, advantages were a double portion of the inheritance. You immediately became, when it was your time, the leader of the clan, the head of the family. You would also have special blessings that would come your way, as it was seen, that would ensure you would be successful and prosperous. Now, that's the understanding of the birthright in the First Testament. The Second Testament expands this concept of birthright, not just to the firstborn, but to all those who are born again, born of water and the Spirit, to all of God's children. And this birthright includes salvation, eternal life, living life in the presence of the Father, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, adoption of God's family, heirs of God's promise, a new nature where Christ is being formed in you. That's a big birthright. And then the right someday to rule and reign with Christ over the new heaven and the earth. Now, the Hebrew word for despise, bavitz, or bavetz, I'm not sure which, is to treat something with contempt. To think of something valuable as worthless. To take lightly, even carelessly, a special heirloom that you have been given. And this Hebrew word, bavitz, is used in other places in the Bible to describe people who treat God's word, God's commands with contempt, or who do not value their relationship with God. For example, in Isaiah 5:20, the prophet Isaiah says that the people of Judah have despised the Holy One of Israel. I mean, they're talking about their relationship, not just to their birthright, but to God, the very being of Yahweh. So what we got here is Esau is flippant about his privilege. Esau is flippant about his moment that he's been given this great gift to live this moment, and he's living for the moment. He's living in and out of his belly. My mother had a favorite phrase that we heard all the time: you eat to live, you don't live to eat. And so he was into immediate gratification. I just heard this week, my 7-year-old came in and said, I'm so hungry, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm so hungry, I'm going to die, I'm so hungry. Okay, he sounds like Esau. And in the best sense of the word, in the New Testament sense, if you will, the Second Testament sense, birthright basically doesn't have anything to do with economics or clan or class or social stature or education. What it has to do is to be in relationship, proper relationship with your birth story and your birth family and the God who ultimately created you. I was let me get a little autobiography here. I was heir of a rich and elite birthright and lived on the poorest street in town, and was born to parents without a college education, and one of them didn't have a high school degree, but a Bible school degree instead. The Sweet family, my birthright. We had no property. We had no money. We had no title. We survived by getting handouts from people on welfare because my Appalachian mother and my Adirondack Mountain father were too proud to go on welfare and get government assistance. We're a product of mountain culture. In the mountains, they prized independence. And so we didn't ask for help. And my mother, we had footstools in the house that were made out of gallon tomato cans. And she'd stuff them with some kind of stuffing, paper sometimes, or scraps of rags, and then wrap it in some fabric, put some top to it that had a little stuffing sewn on the top. We learned from an early age that we were not going to get any help from our parents to go to college, and yet we were expected not to go to college, but all my brothers and I, all three of us, were expected to get PhDs with no financial help. We were just going to do it, and we did. All of us did. The Sweet boys, the poorest street in town, yet had some of the greatest birthright, because we didn't know we were poor. We thought we were rich. We were rich in dreams. We were rich in favor with God. Even when the church defrocked my mother and she wore a wedding band, and they took her ordination certificate away, and another church imposed a ban on the Sweet family for 2 years for having a TV in their home. I mean, literally, nobody spoke to us in the church. Even relatives didn't speak to us because we'd been banned by the church. But we didn't. We were, as part of this birthright, we were rich in Bible stories. We had 2 family prayer times a day. We were favored by God for learning the scriptures. And beginning at age 5, all of us started in this Bible Memory Association plan. So a birthright doesn't need to be tangible to be valuable. Many of the greatest birthrights are intangible, not tangible. My birthright was intangible, but wealthy. I was born of wealth with no money. Our birthright was the wealth of the mind, the wealth of the spirit, the wealth of a healthy body, not the wealth of things. So I was born into privilege. And we were taught not to deny our privilege, but to accept our privilege, to be grateful for our privilege, and to be accountable for that privilege. So the privilege of favor doesn't have to do with money or class or education or advantage or access to health care, connections to the powerful or famous. We had the most important features of privilege. We had a head start in life because, as we were taught, first of all, we're privileged of being born in the USA, a place of impossibilities. We had the privilege of parents who invested in us and themselves to the point of not leaving us to our own devices. And this is before there were devices. We had the privilege of God's presence. We had family prayer twice a day, sometimes 3 times when my mother felt we needed. We had to come home from school, we have another family prayer. So the privilege of dwelling in God's presence, and the privilege of prayer together as a family, and the privilege of worship 3 times a week. At least we were in church, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night prayer meeting, at least 3 times. And then we had, youth groups and all that. So the privilege of worshiping community, and the privilege of service, and the privilege of responsibility for serving others living not for ourselves, but for others because of such a rich birthright. You have no, this makes you accountable. It makes you responsible having such a great. So we were privileged kids on the poorest street in town. We were taught to use our privilege to help others. And this meant that we were taught to be aware of our privilege, to understand that my brothers and I had advantages that others did not, and to use those advantages to serve others. Long before the series Succession, we were taught to pray for the richest kids in town. This was called the Shine family. If you look at the Shine media empire, and the story of that Shine empire is really the story of succession. I wonder if they didn't get it from the Shine empire that lived in Gloversville, New York. And we were taught that the Shine family, we need to pray for them because they were these rich kids were poor in the things that were really mattered in life, things that really made one rich. We were sent to the public school, but Mother homeschooled us in Christian theology and in Christian history and in Christian identity. My mother's motto was, I'm not going to isolate you boys, but I am going to insulate you. And she insulated us. That was our privilege. Even as we acquired more and more learning, and this was self-taught here by my uneducated, unschooled parents who just taught us. We were taught that scholarship was not just to make us more learned and more show-offy about our knowledge, but was to be used for the service of others and to help others to learn and to love learning. Our advantages were not something we earned. We were born into them, and thus the importance of being humble and grateful about them. We were rich in dreams. God has great things in store for you boys. It was a refrain of my mother's. We were rich in diversity. My mother brought us every 2 weeks to lead worship at the county farm, is what it was called, the county home. This is where all the poor people and the homeless and the disadvantaged and the paraplegics and all the people that had mental problems and my mother brought us there just to immerse us in the diversity of the human family. These are part of our family too. And we're taught, you ever show any fear or any kind of chagrin at being in their presence, they are God's children too. And so you honor them and love them and show them the same kind of response you show everybody else and all your friends. And we were punished if we didn't, if we flinched at all when faced with the disabilities that can be, for a little kid, scary. Now, everything has a negative, and every birthright has some negatives. Every birthright has some toxic, even abusive features. After all, the Isaac birthright was a father who tried to kill him. And part of my birthright was parents who, if they were alive today, my brothers and I laugh about this, they'd be in jail because they had an understanding of physical discipline that included physical whippings, beatings, switches, rods, paddles, slaps. Every parents make mistakes, and every parent messes up their kids in some way. So I'm not speaking out of any special thing here. Every child has to survive their parents' parenting, and every parent has to survive their kids' childhood. It's a two-way street. Both parenting and childhood is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Oh. But no matter how bad some of the aspects of my birthright might have been, I and my brothers were given a precious birthright. But part of a birthright of favor and privilege is a sense of responsibility to create, hear it, a legacy with that birthright and make a better world. Now, there's a difference between a birthright and a legacy, and this is where I want to get box and out of the box. When you build on what you have received and add to it, you make it better by your initiative and industry and integrity. That's when you create a legacy to pass on. So a birthright you are given, it's something you receive. A legacy is something you build and you pass on. You give. Birthright you receive, a legacy you give. Birthright is the ground your legs are given to stand on at birth. Legacy is what your arms build and pass on to others. In other words, birthright is beneath your feet. Legacy is in your hands. And legacy is earned. Birthright, legacy is given. Earned birthright is given. A legacy is something that is built over time through hard work, sacrifice, and dedication. A birthright is something that is simply given to you by virtue of your birth. So let me put this in a metaphor, and let's get back to the box and out of the box. Your birthright is your box. Your birthright is your birth box. One of the most important of the Ten Commandments, some scholars, Jewish scholars, argue this is the most important of all the Ten Commandments. Honor your father and your mother. Don't despise your birthright. But to leave a legacy, you have to leave your box. You have to get out of your box. So the paradox is you honor and live in your box so that you can leave and better your box. Anybody ever hear of Malvina Reynolds? She was a folk singer, and she, in 1962, appeared on the scene with a song. And let me just see if anybody recognizes this. You ready? Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes on the sea. Now, that was 1962. She had a friend named Pete Seeger, and she went to visit him. Pete Seeger says, sing us some of your new songs, and Pete Seeger in 1964 picked this up and made it famous. And here you may know his version a little better. Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And the rest of the lyrics, some of you may remember them. And the people in the houses all go to the university. They all get put in boxes, little boxes, all the same. And there's doctors and there's lawyers and business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And they all play on their golf courses and drink their martini dry, and they all have pretty children, and the children go to school, and the children go to summer camp, and they do and go to university. They all get put in boxes, and they all come out the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family, and they all get put in boxes, little boxes, all the same. There's a green one and a pink one, and a blue one and yellow one, and they all are made of ticky-tacky. And they all look just the same. When you never leave your box, the world shrinks to the size of your box. We live in a world where people are in their little ideological boxes and political boxes and religious boxes, and everybody's living out of their little boxes, and they're different color boxes, but they all look just the same. And the challenge here, but we all need to, this is where I started, this is my birthright, this is where I began, this is my birth story. But the point is not to stay in the box, not to live just out of your birthright, but to create a legacy. And to create a legacy, you got to get out of your box. You got to do something new. You got to make it better. A few years ago, I was taking my kids on safari in South Africa, two of them, and we were there. I was to speak, and part of the deal was you speak for us, and we'll take you on safari. And so, Thane, my oldest, was within the first couple of hours had seen 4 of the big 5. Now, the big 5 are the animals that are the most dangerous for man to be around and to hunt, and the big 5 are the elephant, the lion, the leopard, the rhinoceros, and then the buffalo. Actually, the buffalo is really the dangerous of the big 5, even though the lion gets the credit. But so he was feeling really cocky. I've only been here a couple hours, and we're here for a couple days. I've already seen 4 of the big 5. What more is there? And the one he hadn't seen was the leopard, by the way. And so the guide wanted to bring a little humility to Thane. And so he said, well, Thane, actually the biggest killer of humans in the wild is not part of the big 5. It isn't? He said, no, it's the crocodile. He said the crocodile has this relationship with hippos. What hippos do is, hippos, who are vegetarians, they will knock humans out, they will overturn boats, and the crocodiles are there waiting. So as soon as the boat gets overturned, before they can overturn the boat to make it right side up and climb back in the boat again. And he said, so the crocodile is the real killer, even though it's not part of the big 5. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. He said, yeah, there's another interesting thing about the crocodile, this guide said, is that almost all animals in nature, including the human, have incremental growth. In other words, you grow to a certain size and you stop. But there are few animals in nature that have what he calls somatic growth. In other words, they keep growing as long as they live. As long as they live, they keep growing. Now, and they may not be much, like a turtle. A lot of turtles, they grow as long as they live, but they don't grow that much. But they can get like a Galapagos turtle. I mean, how big they are. You could ride them. They just keep growing as old as they get. And he said the crocodile is one of them. No, sharks are others, but crocodile, as long as it is alive, will keep growing. I go, wait a minute. I said, I grew up. We could go down to Woolworths, 5 and dime store. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about, but you go to, and you could actually take home pet turtles and pet crocodiles. I don't think you could take home a pet crocodile if it was going to take over the house. And he said, yeah, but do you remember anything about how you brought that crocodile home? I said, yeah, I brought it home in a box. He said, yeah, and what did it say on the box? And I said, I actually do remember. It was big letters everywhere. Do not take crocodile out of the box. He said, that's right, because as long as the crocodile stays in the box, it won't get any bigger than the box. It only will keep growing if you get it out of the box. And when it gets out of the box, then there is no limit as to how big it can grow. And all of a sudden, it hit me. We need a box of birthright to honor and not to despise, to admit and be humble at the privileges with which we were born. And that's our birthright box. But in order to leave a legacy for succeeding generations, we have to get out of the box. I'm born with this 2-pound box of brains, but for me to grow, I got to get my 2-pound box of brains out of this box and expose it to your 3-pound box of brains so that we can grow together and I can leave a legacy that is bigger than my birthright box. So I live my box to leave my box, but I do both at the same time. I live it, I honor it, I celebrate it, but I live it and honor it and celebrate my birthright most when I leave that box and get out of it to create a legacy of something new and fresh and innovative. And the paradox, and I mentioned this to begin with, the paradox is the more out of the box you get, and the more out of the box your thinking becomes, the more you need to live your birthright box. Kate Rawls is a professor, but decided to take a 13-month eco-adventure in South America. She wanted to look at the places that are most vulnerable now, the part of the rainforest that are being chopped down, and she wanted to do it sensitively. So she did it on a bamboo bike. I've never even seen a bamboo bike, but she took this 8,000-mile journey in the Andes on this bamboo bike. Her book is called The Life Cycle, where she talks about this, just came out. And she has in it this quote that captures for me this this paradox of the birthright box and the legacy out of the box. I loved being on the move. Remember, 18,000 miles through the Andes. But there are so many places that made me want to be still. I loved being on the move. But there were so many places that made me want to be still. The more we're moving out of the box into new arenas and on the margins and on the peripheries, the more we need and yearn for that birthright, birth story box, the rock from whence we were hewn, to honor it, not to despise it, but to honor it so that we can turn that birthright into a legacy.